It was truly eat, sleep, NFL draft coverage, repeat. That was my life this past weekend. That was most of our lives in Pittsburgh media this past weekend, and maybe even your life as a fan this past weekend. But the NFL draft now is in the rearview mirror. The Pittsburgh Steelers were able to retool their roster a little bit. They were able to fill some of those needs that they entered the draft looking for. And now it's fully about the offseason for the NFL and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So on this episode of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, I'm your host, Mike Asti, and I'm going to guide you through the Steelers' recent draft picks, the 2020 draft class for the Pittsburgh Steelers, the draft class that we touched on so diligently and really hammered home in. I hosted 9 hours of draft coverage between the Steelers' first pick of the second round, the Steelers' second pick of the third round, and we actually even covered the first round even though the Steelers didn't have a pick. All of the highlights there on our channel, all of our coverage on Steelers Now. I'm going to give the Steelers a letter grade. I'm going to talk about each pick here and whether or not that was the right pick based on who was available and how the Steelers did because, it's not clear. You're not really going to be able to know how they did until a few years from now. Yet there's already some projections. There's already some people saying big things about certain members of the Steelers draft class. There's always predictions out there, and here's one here. Already having people say that Chase Claypool, former receiver from Notre Dame, the Notre Dame product, and now a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, he was the Steelers' second-round pick at pick 49, the first pick of that draft, that he's going to be Offensive Rookie of the Year. There's some already saying that, and it was a pick that had some debate, controversy there at that selection on who they picked, and maybe even said to be not the best available at that position. So we're going to touch on all of that here, and this maybe is going to serve as a recap show. I guess this is a recap show of our NFL draft shows that you can actually still go back and watch to see our instant reactions to each of those selections. Myself and the rest of the crew, Alan Saunders, Cale Berger, and Nick Fairbar, our main draft analyst, all joined me on that program. I, though, was the only one who hung all through 9.5 plus hours without even a bathroom break. And how I did that, I don't know, but I've done some long hours of radio in my day, so I guess I already have the skill that I can hold it. I guess I'll say there was nothing down underneath the desk that was allowing me to relieve myself during the show, and I did chug some Diet Cokes during that program and water with lemon. So again, this is the NFL Draft Recap Show here of Mic Drop on Pittsburgh Sports Live and, of course, Steelers Now. And, yes, we're going to start with Chase Claypool. The Steelers pick Chase Claypool, number 49, second round. It ends up being their first pick. And before we get to him, actually, I think I should get this out, too, because I think one thing the Steelers accomplished throughout this draft maybe is my favorite thing that they accomplished because it at least takes away an annoyance that I deal with and that I've dealt with the last year or so. As this part of Steeler coverage, ever since he arrived in the Steelers, this part of Steeler coverage has been the annoying part, the drama that involves the Steelers, and this has been the main drama, this debate, ever since A.B. and Bell and that drama left. It's been about moves the Steelers made because Kevin Colbert's been a little bit more of a trigger finger. He's a little bit more of that I don't give a you-know-what attitude, trying to win now, as they should, trying to maximize the last couple years of Ben Roethlisberger, unlike, say, another historic franchise and how they handled the drafting of a young quarterback, trading up to do so and not worrying about their veteran quarterback. I may get to that later as well, but I'll digress. And before I get to Chase Claypool, I do want to touch on first round, the Steelers don't have a pick. Okay, that's upsetting. People were upset about that when they traded that first-round pick a year or so ago away to the Dolphins, but they got Minkah Fitzpatrick. And the Steelers didn't know at the time that Minkah Fitzpatrick was going to end up being an All-Pro, that he was end up going to be in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year, that he would have had historic weeks, week after week after week, in which he would create turnovers and he would be a very impactful player that would be part of how they even finished a game out of the playoffs, even though they did not get in. And some may still bring up that, okay, they didn't get in, so that means it's a lost cause. That was a win-now move. You didn't win. Your quarterback was hurt. You didn't get in. It was all for naught. You should have had that first-round draft pick. You should have kept it. That would have been the Steelers of old. Well, this NFL draft class here in 2020 proved why that's just ridiculous, why that opinion would just be asinine, and how Minkah Fitzpatrick, regardless how he played last year, and of course he played amazingly, is part of the Steelers' future. And Minkah Fitzpatrick is a guy that was well worth that first round pick. Number one, he's still on that rookie deal. He's not getting paid tons of money. So he's going to be there for a while, for several years. It wasn't about the present day, it was about the future, and you're not going to be losing tons of money. So it would be the same as if you drafted somebody. He's on the same type of deal. And yes, a year or two less on the deal because he already got drafted by the Dolphins a few years back and did play a year with them. But he was the number 11 pick overall at that time, a first-round draft pick. So you got him as an inside 15 pick rounder in the first round for the Dolphins. He's a product out of Alabama. He has that pedigree to win. He knows how to do it in the NFL. And you got, maybe more importantly, in number two, you got a veteran player, even though he's on that rookie deal, who is already developed. He's already more developed than anyone you would have drafted to this point, and of course he's been playing well. He's a part of your future. He's going to be there for years to come. That move was not about the present day. That move was not just bringing in somebody for 1 year in win-now mode. If that was what it was, I would have agreed with you. It was stupid. After your Hall of Fame quarterback goes down, you're probably not winning a championship that year. But that move was about the future as well as the present. That move was about next season, the year after that, and maybe beyond that, depending on if they can bring him back. But we'll see. They can maximize talent while they have it. Minkah Fitzpatrick fits in with the Steelers. He loves being with the Steelers. He was a first-round draft grade. The Dolphins didn't know what to do with him. He's on a rookie deal. He's not getting paid tons. He's going to be there a while. It was not a present-day move. It was for the future. And here's the main reason that we discovered from the 2000 NFL draft. This is what it uncovered, and this is maybe why it could boost up the Steelers draft grade regardless of what else they do here that I'll reveal towards the end of the show. There was nobody better available. I don't know if the Steelers knew that. They may have. They scout. They knew what's coming. But it was really, really evident when you see those draft picks go, when you look at those players, when you study those players, when you see their positions, when you see which teams drafted who, some surprises, some conventional. Nobody was better. There were some safeties. There were some corners. There was some secondary help, and safety was going to be a need position for the Steelers if they did not trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Safety was a need position for the Steelers for several years now. And it had been exposed for several years prior to bringing in Minkah Fitzpatrick. So you bring in Minkah, you bring in a veteran who's ready, who played well, who's now already a Pro Bowler, who knows your system now, and is ready for your really win-now mode season of next year, and especially the year after that, depending on how long Ben stays before retiring. There was nobody you were going to get better. There was nobody else in the draft, and they would draft a safety later on. There was nobody else in the draft that was going to be better than Minkah Fitzpatrick. There just absolutely was nobody, and there were many, like McKinney, like Fulton, who ended up falling in the draft. And maybe the Steelers would have drafted one of those. I'd imagine that if they did not trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick, the Pittsburgh Steelers would have drafted probably McKinney. Maybe they would have drafted Fulton. Who knows? Those guys ended up falling out of the first round. We ended up talking about them and were shocked about their fall going into our round 2 and 3, our part 2 of the NFL draft show that, again, you can find on Pittsburgh Sports Live. They're great players, but they needed some work. There was a reason why they fell. Safety was not a deep position in the draft. There was nobody who was elite. There was no Ed Reed. There's no Troy Polamalu slam dunk out of Miami and out of USC that you know that if you get those guys right away, they're going to produce. They're already strong minds and Hall of Famers at their position in college. That wasn't really the case with anybody. There were talented guys who maybe could produce, who maybe will produce. We'll see what happens. But they fell because there was no namesake Hall of Famer, legit guy that you knew would be your solidified product and would dominate you and have Pro Bowl seasons for years to come. Nobody could guarantee that for any safety coming out in this draft. And you can't guarantee that when you traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Nobody's going to expect what he did this past year. But he did it. And even if you only get half that production for next year with, you would think, a more experienced team, maybe even a better team, and a team that I feel like will get in the playoffs, especially now with the NFL's new format allowing an extra team into the postseason. The Steelers would have been that team in 2019, actually, as well as the prior year, despite all the AB drama that I had to cover. Minka Fitzpatrick fits in. Minka Fitzpatrick played well, and Minka Fitzpatrick fills the need. And Minka Fitzpatrick, they gave up a first-round pick. That's big, but he was better than anybody else in the draft that they would have got in that first round. So that's one thing that I'm glad the draft put to bed. That's one thing that I'm glad the Steelers were able to accomplish and at least prove, which I had been saying all through last season, even after the trade was made and what he did on the field, because I knew that it was about the future. But we were all proved right, all of us who were on that position, and all of you who were worried about the number one pick and the first round pick and not having one. Well, you're wrong. It's okay, you guys. I'm sure you've been wrong before, but Minka, in all honesty, was better than anybody available there. Now, going to the second round. This is the Steelers' first pick. Obviously not a first-round pick. That ended up basically being Minka off the trade. But as I brought up earlier, it was Chase Claypool. He ended up being the number 49 overall selection, the receiver out of Notre Dame, and many are already saying that he's a candidate for Offensive Rookie of the Year next year. This was a pick that was a bit surprising to me, and not for position. Of course, the Steelers were going to draft a receiver here, or at least I thought it was going to be a running back or receiver, but I think to something we'll get in a minute concerning JuJu is why they went in this direction in terms of his future with the Steelers and some rumors that were involved there and whether or not they were going to trade him. I will give you my take there after this, but Chase Claypool is a guy that fits in with the Steelers. I think it was a guy that they thought would fit in with what they were doing and their system, a guy who's very similar to JuJu. So next year he'll be kind of JuJu Jr. and be able to slide under the radar as number 3 or 4, depending on how guys do in front of him with James Washington and Deontay Johnson, who had a great rookie season based on all the scenarios around him with the backup quarterbacks. But if JuJu does end up having to leave, if they can't pay him, if he wants more money, or if he has another poor season, which was the case in 2019, then maybe he wouldn't be back just off of level of play. Either way, he's going to get that money, and it's probably not going to be with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Chase Claypool, who will be on a rookie deal, as we brought up with Minka and who that draft pick would have been, will be able to fit right in. Will be able to take that JuJu spot. He might not be dancing on the street in the middle of the 4-pit tunnel. He may not be going to every single club on the south side. He may not be as fun on social media, on Twitter, guys, unfortunately. But regardless, he can fit that bill of a big body who can run routes, who can help you in the goal line territory, who can move the chains, who can create plays, who can be a playmaker, and definitely help you in the red zone. All things JuJu did mostly through his freshman and sophomore season, his rookie and then year 2 in the NFL, and didn't get to do as much in 2019. And if you believe that's because of backup quarterbacks, okay. He didn't get separation. He didn't play well. He needs to play better. But either way, Chase Claypool now will have the ability to do that same thing. So if they do lose JuJu, whether you want to or not, Chase Claypool can fit right in. And until that time, because JuJu's going to be back for at least one more season, you can have Chase Claypool be a pretty damn good number 4. Now, what I will say, though, I personally did not evaluate him as a top receiver who was available at that point. I wanted them to draft wide receiver. I thought that made the most sense. I thought it made more sense than, say, running back, just because of the longevity of the position, the shelf life, and they need help in the running game. But I had another idea for them that I'll also get to later. Receiver was the need. And as Chase Claypool fits in, and there's a reason to like the pick, and the grade's high, and people are saying Offensive Rookie of the Year again, as a candidate at least, and he's going to fit in for JuJu, I think that was more about need and fit, and that he fits more what the Steelers are going to do and can replace the production of JuJu if he does leave in a year. However, Mims, the receiver out of the Big 12, out of Baylor, who is that bigger body but a playmaker, can really jump up there and get it. He's not as much of the route runner that Claypool is. He's not as much of the JuJu guy. He's maybe more similar to a James Washington who is on this roster, who has been spotty and consistent maybe with Mason Rudolph more than Ben. And you like him to step up and be that number 2, and that's a big deal to help the depth chart of the receiver corps. But regardless, Chase Claypool fits more into the Steelers. So I kind of understand it in retrospect, even though in terms of overall value, I would think Mims was a better receiver. He had a better college career. He was more of a playmaker. He was more of that guy that can take the top off the defense, that can really help things. I would imagine the only critique of that draft pick of Chase Claypool, and again, there are people predicting a lot from him. Okay, there are people saying Offensive Rookie of the Year is possible, and maybe the depth chart won't allow it, but he certainly is somebody that can produce and can fit in, and maybe even have more of an impact on 2 years from now if he would end up replacing JuJu. The thing is, though, Mims is that guy that probably Ben Roethlisberger would have drafted. If Ben was in charge of the war room, if Ben had his say, and not to say he doesn't give his opinion subtly or whether it's wanted or not, and whether or not he's happy, you'll know it. And you used to know from that radio show he had. I always loved those uppercuts and subtle jabs he would give to teammates every now and then if they deserved it. However, Ben has always loved the playmaker receiver, the guy with a little bit more length who can jump up for the ball and really take the top off the defense. He loved it with Plesko Burress. He was upset when Plesko Burress left early in his career. He was upset when they got rid of Santonio Holmes, especially for the low value, despite all his off-the-field issues, and connected for that Super Bowl game-winning catch between the two of them. He's always wanted that. And we'll see. He got hurt last year, so didn't really get to see the development of James Washington. We'll see if James can be better now with him on the field if Ben can stay healthy. Mims would have been that guy. Mims would have been a similar player who could have given that to Ben towards the end of his career and helped take the top off the defense and create those big plays and maybe shock the defense and on a 3rd and 4 go up top and let it be man-to-man, and Mims would win those battles. The Randy Moss type of stuff, not to say he's Moss at all. That's what Big Ben has always coveted. That's what Big Ben wants. And that would keep Big Ben hanging around because it'll make his job easier in a way, or at least big plays-wise for his stats, which he does care about. However, maybe it's Big 12. I mean, the Big 12 offense will throw in every other pass. Things are spread out. The defenses aren't there. The secondary's not really there. Those teams in the Big 12, for the most part, didn't have quality secondaries, and they weren't really trying to clamp down on you defensively. So, okay, maybe that's an indictment of the Big 12. Maybe that's going to hurt recruiting in the future. Maybe that's going to hurt NFL players. We've seen some big play wide receivers in the Big 12 over the years get drafted high and then falter, and Crabtree's had a good career. I'll give Crabtree a good career, but not the Pro Bowl type career, consistent top elite receiver career that he was predicted to do in the NFL coming out of Texas Tech. And there's other receivers in the Big 12 that have slid that maybe some thought more of. Go down there to Morgantown for an example. Those years under Will Grier, those receivers didn't really have much success in the NFL. They didn't get drafted where they were supposed to be. We haven't seen much of them yet, now a couple years into that opportunity. And maybe it's an indictment of the Big 12. We'll see. Maybe that was the indictment of Mims because some were surprised. I know I was one of them, and how far he did fall. Eventually drafted by the Jets. The Jets actually traded away from their pick. I thought it was idiotic because they were going to miss out on Mims, who fell into their lap. He then could have fell into the lap of Seattle Seahawks, who traded in that position. They needed a receiver and more help for Russell Wilson. They don't do it either. We said this on the draft show that maybe there's a red flag, and maybe Mims has some problems or injuries or some character issues that we're not aware of. Who knows? He ends up actually being drafted by the Jets later to their next pick after that trade, so he is a Jet. He is going to help Sam Darnold. He'll finally provide him a weapon that he didn't get earlier in the draft and hasn't really yet had in his career. And the Steelers get Chase Claypool, who, again, I do feel fits better into the system, can replace JuJu if need be, but Mims is where I would have went. So you got to wait and see on that pick. What I will also say, though, and this now transitions into the JuJu conversation, because, again, JuJu Smith-Schuster was involved in some rumors heading into the draft. JuJu was involved in rumors in which many were talking about the Steelers trading that draft pick or trading JuJu. I'm sorry, not trading the draft pick, gaining a draft pick by trading JuJu with, say, the San Francisco 49ers, whether they want to get early into the first round at 13, or there was even conversation to 31, another pick by the 49ers to trade and to get the Steelers that first-round draft pick, that they're okay with losing because they needed that position of safety and they got Minka in the trade, but it would have got him back in the first round. Turned out that didn't happen. And the reason why that trade exists, or why those rumors existed, whether or not they were legit or not, because honestly, no one really got to truly uncover that, even though we all tried. The trade didn't happen, so maybe we'll never know. But it's because JuJu has another year left on his deal. JuJu has seen all these receivers get big money, including his former teammate Antonio Brown, and he saw the drama that erupted, but he also saw the money that AB got. And again, AB got that as the best receiver in the game, but he's seen all this money spread out amongst receivers, and he's going to want some of it. He knows that his rookie year, he had a season that's compared to Randy Moss as an NFL rookie. He knows he had over 900 yards as an NFL rookie out of seemingly nowhere. He knows that in his second year, he had a better year than Antonio Brown, who was still arguably the best receiver in football prior to all that drama, and his numbers were better. He's aware, I'm sure, whether he wants to admit it or not, they didn't have a great year in 2019, but he can point to the excuses of the backup quarterbacks, as all his fans will, and they didn't have an opportunity. So him and his agent are going to go in there, and they're going to want more money. They're going to want tons more money. They're going to want the brink truck right into their backyard, and they're going to want the bag. And look, they're going to get the bag. No matter what I think of JuJu, anyone thinks of JuJu. JuJu's a bit polarizing right now. Regardless, those first 2 years, someone's going to look at those years, look at the backup quarterbacks, depending on how he plays in 2020, and they're going to give him the bag. They're going to give him a lot of money. Maybe the Raiders, they love doing this to stars and players that have produced before. Maybe he can finally be that former Steeler receiver and do it for them, since AB did not get to be that for them. Who knows? Somewhere else. He'll end up getting that money. Some team will want him. Whether or not it's a winner is another story, but his social media career will continue. His marketing career will continue. He'll still be fun on Twitter. People, the fans will still like him, and he will get that money. Okay? That's going to happen. But it's not going to be by the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's why he was in those rumors. JuJu is not going to be back after a year, guys. I know that's a tough pill to swallow. I know that sucks. I know you hate it. I know you're mad at me anytime, or any of my colleagues anytime we bring it up, but it's true. We're just saying what's true. This isn't my opinion right now. This isn't me waxing poetic on hating on JuJu by any means. We can talk about 2019 and excuses and all that all day. But he's not going to be back. And we were unanimous on the draft show, so go back there. If you don't agree with me, if you don't respect me, I'm sure Alan Saunders is somebody that you do respect. He's covering the Steelers right with me, and he agreed with this. And he was hands down, he would have done the trade for the 13, he would have done the trade for the 31. So we all just know this is going to happen. JuJu is just not going to be back. And it's not anyone dislikes the guy, but he's going to want either too much money. They're not going to want to overpay for a guy or give that money again, knowing what just happened with AB. Maybe he's getting some residual effects there. They might be worried about some of his antics and being the next AB in terms of his personality. Who knows? But he also is coming off of 2019 where I've said this too. I've said this on past shows here. You guys have heard me, and I'll say this again, and this is true until we're proven otherwise into the 2020 season. And James Conner is this guy too, which we'll get to later as well. The JuJu Smith-Schuster maybe has the most pressure on him of any other NFL player to produce next year. He's coming off a poor season, and yes, there were backup quarterbacks in there, but he wasn't good before they got there. And if you look at the analytic numbers, he didn't get separation. That's a major thing you can point to. Deontay Johnson, the rookie, was getting better separation than him when they were both in there. And getting separation is the major stat for a receiver to tell whether or not he can be a number one. Because Antonio Brown was that number one receiver when JuJu was getting all those yards and numbers. And yes, his numbers were better than AB. But without AB there, would those numbers have been the same? Right now, we need that proven to us. Right now, the body of work tells me he's a great player. He can get it done with a partner. Maybe he's the best number two in the NFL over the last few years for sure. You'll want him on your team, and he can produce for you and give you big plays. Right. But if he has to be your number one wide receiver, which is where he is in the depth chart right now for the Steelers, and what that bag money would tell you, that $100 million contract or whatever it would be, what that would tell you is he's a number one wide receiver. And he can get separation. He can have the double coverage on him, and it won't matter. And he can create space for the other receiver, make it easier on the Deontay Johnsons, the James Washingtons, the Chase Claypools of the world. And right now, based on what we know, based on the body of work, based on 2019 especially, even going to those first 2 years, that's not the case. He needs to prove us wrong. He needs to have Ben Roethlisberger be in there so you guys can't complain and use that as an excuse. And then he needs to get separation. He needs to get numbers. He needs a 1,000-yard receiving season. He needs to stay healthy. He needs to make plays and do it. Really, whoever's the quarterback, because there's been some Hall of Fame quarterbacks that didn't have the luxury of dealing with an elite quarterback throughout their whole career. Look at T.O., for example. But regardless, Ben's going to be there. He's going to be healthy. He's going to be back. But no matter who's there, he won't be able to use back-to-back struggling seasons as an excuse when he wants that money. And even if somebody else is quarterback and somehow Ben gets hurt again, he needs to be able to get the separation and then get open. And if the catch isn't completed, he needs to be able to have agents and GMs and scouts and the war rooms and executives of those teams look at the tape and say that's not on JuJu, that's on the backup quarterback, who's now forced to start, and that's a situation that's not fair to JuJu. We'll still can give him the money if our guy is healthy and we have a better quarterback than Duck or Mason. And I've touched on those two will be the backup. I won't get into the Winston thing. That was in a past show. But the point of it is that right now is not evident. That right now has not been proven because he couldn't get separation, regardless of who's the quarterback. So he needs to get that separation with the double coverage on him. And until then, he can't prove or say he's the number one. But regardless, he's going to be gone in a year. Either he'll want too much money if he has another monster year and proves me wrong about being a number one, or if he's not proven to be a number one, then why keep him around? Because you can draft somebody else. They already now have a deep receiver class. So the Steelers bring in Claypool. He's going to replace JuJu. I think it's actually a wise move because they will fit into similar positions. He can learn under JuJu and then replace him. They will fit and do similar things. Maybe James Washington can step up and be what Mims would have been. You then go to number 3, though. You then go to the number 3 over the number 3, meaning the round 3 pick, the number 102 pick overall in the NFL draft, and the Steelers' second pick technically of the draft. And it's Alex Highsmith. And this, I think you really need to go to the Pittsburgh Sports Live show. You need to go to the highlights there if you don't want to watch the entire draft shows. And especially listen to Nick Faribaugh, who is a really, really young mind. The man's a freshman in college, for crying out loud. But he's going to be a future star because he's able to really pick apart the NFL draft better than anyone I've seen who's even much older than him. Regardless, he said this, and I'm going to reiterate from what I've seen and what I know too. Alex Highsmith can be a solid linebacker for you. He is from a smaller school, and it's surprising that he would go in the 3rd round because smaller school players were kind of getting hurt by the virtual draft and not having the pro day. That did not affect him. You maybe could argue he got drafted above where many would have thought with the 4th or 5th round grade on him. But Nick liked the pick. I like the pick, and the reason why I like the pick is Devin Bush last year is obviously that linebacker of the future. He's obviously going to be that face of that defensive franchise, and I've argued that on shows as well. But the thing about Devin Bush is he's a smaller guy. He's more of a cerebral linebacker. He knows the game. I saw him last year in rookie minicamp. He already knew the plays and was calling out the plays like it's Ray Lewis out there. He can be the face of your defense. He started really playing well towards the end of last season. I expect a lot out of him in his 2nd season in the league. But he's not a big body linebacker. He can't bruise you. He can't make the tackles that Ray Lewis could make. He can't be that type of guy. And Alex Highsmith maybe could. That's why you don't go to other linebackers who are above him in a draft grade. You need that stronger, bulky linebacker. Even if he's in a small school and you need to fix him, he might be a project, but he really could help you if need be. That also fits. So the Steelers so far doing more fit than value. But Devin Bush, they legitimately traded up for. It certainly has worked out. That was a big guy that, in terms of a big star that they've wanted for years and coveted, and they got him. He's the face of that defense moving forward, I'd imagine, and I've said that again on past shows here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. But Highsmith fits that different type of linebacker with more size, which maybe you also need. Now, going down the line here, round 4, pick 124, Anthony McFarland. This is going to segue into maybe the most polarizing part of this show, I'd imagine. And there's highlights, and I've already went back and forth about this on Twitter with all the fans, but I've cut different highlights. It's all through the channel. My opinion on this is clear, and it's basically centered around the fact that the Steelers decided to draft Anthony McFarland Jr., the running back out of Maryland, instead of doing something that I think would have really been win-now mode. Would have really helped this team right now and would have been possible. This was attainable. This isn't pie in the sky, folks. This was obviously rumors. This was a polarizing debate going into the draft, and everybody wanted to make this about James Conner and Leonard Fournette against each other. And there it is. We discussed this. It's on a highlight. It's all through Steelers now. Would trading for Leonard Fournette make sense? Yes, it would. And it's actually what should have happened. It's probably not going to happen now. The draft is over. That's not going to happen now unless they want to give up capital in the future and do something in training camp, because right now he's still in flux there and there's still kind of drama between him and the Jags. Regardless, though, yes, it should have happened. It should have been the way the Steelers replaced the running back position. It should have been the way the Steelers fixed the need of running back, like they did with receiver, like they did with safety when they traded for Minka. They could have done the same thing there. I get it's not old school Steelers football, but Kevin Colbert's proven he's now that I don't give a you-know-what type of GM. He knows his career is not going to last too much longer. Ben's only going to be there a couple more years. They're in win-now mode. Okay? So if you're truly in win-now mode, and I'm not just pointing at the sign, by the way, below me there on click and subscribe on Pittsburgh Sports Live there on the video and the subscribe button below the video here on this channel. I'm that emphatic about this. I gotta wave my finger and let all my limbs flail about, because this is something that I don't get why it's so polarizing. It doesn't have to be about James Conner versus Leonard Fournette. I agree with you in a way that James Conner has played better than Leonard Fournette the last couple years. James Conner was a third-round draft pick coming out of Pitt, of course. He's very, very popular with the fan base. He went to high school in Erie, so he's still kind of from the Western PA region. We know the cancer story. We know how good of a guy he is. He really, really is. He's a really, really nice dude. But he's also been a guy that's been injury-prone going back to high school. He's never really played a full season of the amount of games that team had in a given year, no matter what level it is, high school, college, or professional. And I'm not talking about the year he missed having cancer. I'm talking about just getting beat up and having the regular football injuries. He's not played full seasons. We've seen that in the NFL. You saw his Pro Bowl season get derailed with 900-plus yards and not end up with an 1,000-yard season because of injuries. We saw last year it end up getting derailed in the injuries and the running back position being a question mark, and the team couldn't run for several weeks in a row without him, and he once again got beat up and got injured. And yes, if he was in there, that would have helped the running game, and unlike Leonard Fournette, who maybe has underachieved the last few years, James Conner has overachieved. I didn't expect James Conner to be as successful as he's been the last few years, and I certainly didn't think he could replace Le'Veon Bell as admirably as he has. For a third-round pick, he's honestly done well, okay? This is nothing against James Conner. He's done well. And I'm not saying get rid of the guy. You're not going to get rid of the guy. That was never going to be the situation. You want him there. What I have figured out, what some want to ignore because they love James Conner so much, and maybe you love the story of James Conner. Maybe you're a Pitt fan as well as a Steelers fan, and you love that he's a Pitt guy. Maybe you just love the local boy who's done good, who's overachieved. Maybe you like the cancer story or how nice of a guy he is. I don't know. I'm not rooting against him either. But what I will say, I've determined, and many of my colleagues have too, that he's not a featured back. Okay, he's not going to be your number one to just lead you to the promised land on his back. That's not going to be James Conner. He hasn't been able to hold up for an entire year. The yards per carry are there. The yards are there when he's in there. He's had some big games. He's helped you win some games. But he's also helped you lose some games. We know about the fumbles. We know about the turnovers. We know how he's laid the ball on the ground and lost those games repeatedly since becoming the starter for the Steelers. And the ideal thing for James Conner is to have that pressure taken away. Still there, still producing, still being a key cog, but sharing that load. And it could maybe happen with Benny Snell, who they drafted last year. That could happen. Benny, another good dude. He does this thing now and did this thing last training camp that I actually asked him once, can I have an interview, man? This was the Friday night light practice out there in Latrobe at Latrobe High School. And he looked at me, flashed those pearly whites, loves flashing the smile, and said, yeah, of course, you're in media. I can't turn you down. Got to do this. Well, Alan and I laughed because I looked right at him and said, yeah, you know what he said? And he's, yes, you can definitely turn us down there, Benny. Although I'm, glad you didn't, and maybe we'll talk again and I can get him on a show here for Pittsburgh Sports Live. Regardless, maybe he's part of the future. Maybe he can be that back, that 1A to that 1B, maybe to James Conner's 1A. Maybe they can do that together, that Thunder and Lightning. Maybe that would work. But until Benny Snell's ready, and I don't believe he's ready off of last year, he was good, but he didn't show me that he's ready. You needed somebody else. And Leonard Fournette is a former All-Pro talent who, yes, has underachieved a little bit as a first-round draft pick. However, started really playing well last year, showed a lot more last year behind a really bad offensive line, probably worse than what James Conner's dealt with in Pittsburgh. His yards per carry a little bit worse, but he's certainly shown some promise that he could pick up on that. Last year was better than the year before. And he's a guy that had so much talent coming out of college that when you get rid of some character issues, which are there, I get that being a concern, you really could have a dominant back and maybe a new system, maybe a team that actually has a chance to win, like Connor's been on with the Steelers, the Jaguars being well out of the race most of those years he was there. So maybe that could rejuvenate him. But again, this isn't about comparing him to James Conner, because the ideal thing for me was to trade that 4th-round pick, and people talked about trading the 6th-round pick, and you would have done it there. Okay, sure, definitely would have done it for a 6th-round pick, but I would have done it for a 4th-round pick. I would have traded that 4th-round pick when the Steelers draft Anthony McFarland, the running back out of Maryland. I just wouldn't have done that. I would have traded that 4th-round pick. I would have tried to get Leonard Fournette. I would have paired Fournette and James Conner together. You have the 1A, you have the 1B, you have Thunder, you have Lightning. That works perfectly. That helps the running game. And I get they're both injury prone, but unless they both get injured simultaneously, you have 2 guys. You have 2 all-pro style running backs that are both there rather than just one and a young kid trying to come up and play well in Benny Snell or McFarland or whoever any other rookie would have been. You have 2 guys who are established in the National Football League that have ran behind NFL offensive lines before, that know how the NFL works and are a few years into their career at least. That would have been the ticket, and Fournette may be talent that hasn't been tapped. He's underachieved, whereas Conner has overachieved. I get it, but this is not pairing the 2 against each other. In my perfect world, the Steelers would have had both. The Steelers would have traded that 4th-round pick. I definitely would have done it. You're in win-now mode. This isn't for the future. You want to win a championship these next 2 years, and you feel like you're at least a playoff team these next 2 years, unlike the last 2. I get it. Then you go ahead and get Leonard Fournette. You pair him with James Conner. Those are 2 backs that would really help you, and that would add you some security if one would go down. You have the other. That could be a dominant 1-2 punch. And we've seen in the NFL the last few years, this actually even goes back further, of teams win not with an elite running back. Look at what the Rams with Todd Gurley. They just bounce them when they're about having to pay him. Teams win with a complement of backs. Teams win with multiple backs who are both good, maybe not great, but multiple backs who are good enough where they don't have to pay them tons of money. And that could have been the situation, at least for next year, with Leonard Fournette. Maybe he wouldn't have been back after a year. Okay, but that's 1 year of the 2 tandem running back, a solid season. You're going for it. You'd have Conner and Fournette for at least 1 year, and you can truly go for it, and that solidifies the running game. That's win-now mode, and that could have been had for only a 4th-round pick if the rumors were correct, especially if it could have been had for a 6th-round pick. I don't see the risk. It seems to have made much more sense than to bring in Anthony McFarland, who, by the way, for anybody that doesn't like my rant of the last 5 minutes on why the Steelers should have traded for Leonard Fournette, you maybe don't like the character issues. You maybe don't like the history of injuries. You already have that in Conner. You don't want to repeat the injury history with somebody else. I can get that. But then drafting Anthony McFarland makes even less sense because you don't want Fournette. Fine. Draft the young kid. Don't do as much win-now mode. Build to the future and have a guy who's going to be there for more than a year. Fine. But Anthony McFarland has the same history of injuries. He also has a history of injuries, and he even has character concerns. So if you're worried about character concerns or injuries or any of that with Leonard Fournette and why you didn't want to do it with him, then how can you defend the Anthony McFarland draft pick? This is the first draft pick I hated for the Steelers. This is the one that made no sense. This isn't win-now mode. Trading for Fournette would have been. And this draft pick is hypocritical because the problems with Fournette and character issues and injuries and not wanting to have that again with another back in your tandem with Conner is now in existence with Anthony McFarland. He has a history of injuries, and he certainly has character issues. So that's hypocritical if that's your issue with the Fournette move. Now, going down the line here, and we're going to wrap this up here, so I'm not going to analyze each of those draft picks there as much because the opportunity for them to even make this team or certainly be on this team in the future is just not as much there. Kevin Dotson, Anthony Brooks, Carlos Davis, those are the remaining draft picks there for the Steelers. That's a guard, it's a safety, that's a need position, but a guy who's later on in the draft, we'll see if he can make it. Minka obviously is filling that need, and he was de facto first-round pick based on the trade. They do need depth there. We'll see what happens, letting different guys in the secondary walk and not picking up their 5th year. TJ is going to be back for at least another year, picking up his 5th year before he has to get big money, and I think he's a guy you pay that big money to. Carlos Davis, we'll see. They just like defensive tackles, whether he makes the team. And Dotson as a guard, that can certainly help things for you. That's interesting, and that was a need position that was kind of underrated and not talked about as much. But overall, what I will say, and we touched on it here on Steelers Now, we really killed the draft coverage, guys. And I'm not just going to say this because I'm a part of Steelers Now, because I'm in management with this site, because I'm running Pittsburgh Sports Live, because I'm part of the leadership of the Now Network. No. It's because we legitimately killed it. As a digital outlet, I'll put our coverage on draft weekend up against anybody else. You go to SteelersNow.com, you go to Pittsburgh Sports Live, those live shows, 9.5 hours of draft show that I hosted round 1 all the way to 3. So 9.5 hours of video radio on our channel on Pittsburgh Sports Live. All the highlights I cut up that are there that are all relevant to what the Steelers did in the rest of the NFL, including a major rant that I had about the Packers' move to trade up to get Jordan Love and not worry about winning now while still having Aaron Rodgers. That's a gem. That's doing well on the channel. Again, SteelersNow.com, and even our corresponding coverage there, Pittsburgh Sports Now and WV Sports Now, on who got drafted out of Pitt, what implications those are, a video and my thoughts, as well as Nick's thoughts on Kenny Robinson out of WVU, who ended up being drafted by the Panthers, and whether or not he could potentially be the steal of the draft, and even go back to my show with Mike Logan, because he touched on his potential thoughts on what the Steelers should have done, and Kenny Robinson as well, who he's mentoring concerning the draft. So Pittsburgh Sports Live, Steelers Now, again, our draft coverage the past week or so has been dominant. This show maybe will kind of complete things finally and put a bow. But our draft coverage last weekend I'll put up against anyone else in the Pittsburgh market, any other credential outlets, especially in the digital space exclusively. We killed it. It was all there. And just look at the main page here, guys. Just look at the main page. You got that's all draft coverage right there. The little NFL draft section, 2020 NFL draft section on the website. It's still going to linger there for a while since we have so much going on. All those highlights, all those articles, all the news, all the analysis right there, SteelersNow.com, all there. Talk about Chase Claypool and how he'll fit into the Steelers receiver corps, which is now pretty deep for at least another year until they end up losing JuJu. Highsmith, a project, but ends up being good off a fit for the Steelers, more so even if, say, Mims was higher up on the Steelers draft board. Conversation about JuJu, you disagree with me and the fact that he's not going to be back after a year and that I would take the value now. Okay, fine. Go hear my colleagues talk about it with me, as we have a highlight there on Steelers Now and on Pittsburgh Sports Live. We have that whole debate as part of those 2 days worth of shows, and then 909, I felt like 900, 9.5 hours worth of radio and visual radio and online radio, whatever you want to call it over there. Thanks to Zoom and the platform there for the virtual show that we did, as well the NFL did the virtual draft, which I also will say I loved and wish they stopped going outside, because I think it actually showed more. It was cooler to see than the actual regular production of the NFL draft. But next year they're going back to Cleveland. They're going to Cleveland, so unfortunately, hopefully I don't have to go there. I'll probably end up being in Cleveland. Not really a destination that you like to have for fans and media when you're getting that first NFL draft back on location after the virtual year. But nonetheless, again, I think we killed it on Steelers Now. I think we killed it on Pittsburgh Sports Live. The entirety of the first round, part 1, and the second and third round, part 2 of our NFL draft show, those back-to-back days, 9.5 hours of content that I hosted over there. Show form, Pittsburgh Sports Live, as well as our news, our highlights, our analysis, every debate imaginable, SteelersNow.com. All there for you. And what I will also say, and this now I guess rounds it out, because I talked about each draft pick, I spoke about my thoughts, what the Steelers maybe should have done, what they did. We touched on the debates here. I'd give the Steelers, honestly, a B-. It was a good draft. They didn't have the picks there to wow anybody. They weren't going to be able to have a Ravens-like draft, which you go on the channel. I'll say this to be fair. The Ravens won the draft. Every single pick they had was a top-value player and filled their need. They're probably the Super Bowl favorite right now, certainly the class of the conference, along with the Chiefs, who also had a great draft, and definitely the class of the AFC North, I would say, going into next season. It's going to be a hard division with the Bengals now finding their Tiger King and getting better with some other value picks. The Browns even filling some needs. It's going to be a tough division, and the winner of that division may have 9 or 10 wins. The loser of that division, the basement dweller of that division, may have 7 or 8 wins. That's how close it maybe could be. We'll see, though, what happens. It's going to go from one of the worst divisions in football a few years ago to now one of the best, certainly the tightest. And those interdivision games, those rivalry games, Steelers-Browns, Steelers-Ravens, Steelers-Bengals, they're always tough no matter how good those teams are. But now those teams are better. They're at least going to be okay. They're all going to be probably close to good, if not better than that, the Ravens being great. And those are going to be big deals. The seeding is going to even be more important. Those games are going to be big deals for sure. And the Steelers, if they don't watch themselves, if they lay some eggs, they get in a blast in that division. Who knows? But it will be close. But again, I would give it a B-. They didn't have the ability to wow anything. I would have been more in win-down mode than I think they are, despite of what they're saying. I would have traded for Fournette. I think he would have made more sense than McFarland, even if he's only there for 1 year to pair with James Conner. It wasn't mean get rid of James Conner, but it would have been pairing the two for at least a year. You're in win-down mode. Fournette wouldn't actually have cost that much against the cap, and even if he's not back there after a year, the character concerns, the injury history with McFarland, the same issues for Fournette. That gives me some concern for a draft pick that you want to be there for years to come. Highsmith, I like. He fits the other need than Devin Bush has, and he's a project, though, so we'll see what happens there. Chase Claypool, I think, fits in. I think it actually was a better pick than if they would have got Mims, even though I love Mims, because Chase Claypool fits the Steeler way. He fits what they need there. He fits what JuJu's doing if JuJu leaves. The rest of the picks filled needs. Those guys might not make the roster, but they filled needs and were interesting at that point. So B- overall, I think it's a relatively fair grade. We're going to keep on moving, though, over offseason coverage because now we transition from the NFL draft to the offseason. And that still can mean a lot, especially for the college sites. Pittsburgh Sports now delivering a lot in terms of commits. WV Sports now doing the same. They're big into what's going on in their off seasons on those sites. As well as this channel here, we're going to have some shows coming up in terms of going through the history of Pittsburgh sports. We're still going to be covering the Penguins on PittsburghHockeyNow.com. There's still tons of Steeler coverage to analyze on these moves and what's going on in the NFL offseason. So I'm going to have all of that here, whatever's going on in the Pittsburgh news of the week. And there still will be news, even without active games here. On these mic drop shows, we introduced the new show we got going on, Pittsburgh Face Off, that we'll have on the channel in terms of a trivia show and the Jeopardy-like program. Maybe some other shows that Matt Geika and I are thinking about. We're going to throw out there on the channel. So we have a lot coming still, a lot of content still for you to make the sponsors happy, but more importantly, you, the subscribers, happy. And our outlet's not going to be negatively affected at all by not having games. So that's still all going to happen for you. We're still always going to have content moving for you. And again, hit up the sites, Pittsburgh Sports Now, Steelers Now, WVSportsNow.com, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, as well as Pittsburgh Hockey Now. It's all out there. Find us here on Pittsburgh Sports Live at PGH Sports Live on Twitter, which, again, you can find right there. There is a graphic for that. At PGH Sports Live on Twitter, Pittsburgh Sports Live on Facebook, PGHSportsLive.com over there online, and at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter and Steelers Now on Facebook for the Steelers social channels. Again, Steelers got a B-. Tell me what you think. Throw it in the comments. Feel free to throw it in the comments and blast me if need be, or find me on Twitter at Mike Asti 11 and we can talk there. But until then, I'm your host, Mike Asti, and, well, until we meet again.